Good afternoon, everyone. I am joined by Jeremy here. Tell us real quickly, what is it that you do for World of Warcraft?
I am a senior game designer, formerly specifically on the Encounter team, moved on to Pet Battles, Timeless Isle, Garrisons, Holidays, and now kind of do a smattering of different
So basically you do everything, is kind of what we're saying here. You've done everything or you're doing it all now?
Or nothing. Yeah, it's one or the other.
We have a wide array of questions for you, so that's great.
Excellent. Well, I will do my best to answer them.
So starting off then, we have got a big move here with the staggered raid release. This might be a bit too content specific, but you've obviously been on the Encounter design team. Perk, I know that you were particularly curious about the difference between the tiers.
Yeah, so this is very different from how raids have been released in past expansions, and can you just talk a little bit about why the change is a pretty drastic shift for raiders to have this 2-month gap, and even having Highmo being more delayed than the initial raids usually are.
It was relatively similar to what we did in Mists of Pandaria, but if you remember the Mists of Pandaria early raid was Mogushan Vault and had, I want to say 6 bosses in it. Less than what's being released in the current Iron Horde raid. So staggering the release of the second thing a little bit further beyond because the set number of bosses increased seemed like the right decision in order to release things on kind of at the rate at which players consume the content. And the same thing with world bosses, with a rotating world boss and with world bosses that come out later in the progress.
So they do come out later? That I think is new to us.
Right. One of the world bosses is going to come out a little bit later in the process. And that gives players the opportunity to experience content even after we've released a big chunk of content rather than consuming it very quickly. Gives you the opportunity to play a little bit more a little bit later.
And I assume that's the guy who drops the higher quality route.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's
a little less sense the opposite. Yeah,
it would be a little bit weird if the later guy dropped the lower quality loot for sure. So are we going to see a move towards more sort of exclusive or time-sensitive content? We've been seeing a ton of that with challenge modes in Mists of Pandaria, had that season requirement added, well not requirement, that seasonal stop added on the end there, the legendary cape, the Blasted Lands event. It's something that you've shied away from a little bit in the past. Are you sort of going back more towards that philosophically right now?
I'd say absolutely. In certain circumstances where it makes sense. Things that make players that played the game during that period of content feel awesome for playing the game during that period of content are definitely things you want to keep around. And that was the reasoning behind the Legendary Cape, where these players put a huge amount of effort into this. It was an awesome experience for that expansion. And a player coming in another couple of years or so, being able to look at another player and say, wow, why do you have green wings coming out of your back? There is an intrinsic value to that player, having that prestige. And it's very similar to removing, and we had done things like this in the past, removing achievements or titles in Wrath, Lich King, or Burning Crusade for things that high-end raiders were doing at those times. So it's sort of the extension of that process as we've gone further and further into the realm of these endgame content elements. And we have more and more of them. You kind of have to pick and choose which one of them feels like something really fun for somebody to continue to be able to go back to. We call that evergreen content, versus a brand new thing that you feel like, okay, this is the right time to encapsulate this. We've got tons of new content coming that we want people focused on, so let's move on to this next thing, and you're going to feel awesome because you were there back in the day of whatever it was.
As a quick follow-up to that, holidays are something that has tons of additions in Warlords. I know you've done some work on them, and they're a great way for players to do something for a really short period of time. Can you talk about why you decided to add a ton of things? Because we didn't really have a ton in Mist, and there's so many cool things even we've already seen with Day of the Dead and Hollow's End.
Well, with time-gated content, I think that the purpose, and very similar to stretching out raids, is to allow players to feel like something new is coming in the future. Something new is happening next week and the week after that they can look forward to, rather than feeling like almost overwhelmed that everything is happening all at the same time. I have to rush to 100 or else I'm going to miss this, launch event, or I'm going to miss this other thing. You want players to feel like this content is coming rather than oppressing them. And that's generally the design philosophy behind a lot of these different things. Giving you the ability to play alts, or the ability to go and spend a week futzing around doing Hollow's End so you can get your Lich King costume. Those in particular were an opportunity where a lot of players had kind of maxed out the content of those individual elements, and it felt like, let's add a couple new things you can purchase to each individual holiday. And once we started digging into the individual holidays, we started thinking more and more about, oh, we should redo these Christmas decorations, and maybe we can add 1 or 2 more quests here. So it's become more of a conversation. We love the idea of elements of WoW that come out every couple of months that feel like they're something that you can look forward to. They're a time of year that feels very special and that has something new for you every year when it comes around. Even if you're not able to get everything this year, even if you weren't able to get 500 tricky treats, that just means there's something else to look forward to next year.
Exactly. Yeah, now, Perk, I know that you had some specific questions. Moving more into the raiding side of things, or the tier things. Perk's the items queen here. Obviously, on Wowhead, we have a ton of item stuff. So I know you had specific questions about some of the tier gear.
Yeah, so at first, we were under the impression that tier gear would not be in LFR, that LFR is mostly tourist mode, the gear, looked different, you didn't have to worry about set bonuses. But we recently saw that there were items added that were item level 655 to Blackrock Foundry that were marked as LFR. So can you talk a little bit about why there's this change? Are people going to be trying to collect these sets if they raid higher levels? Even why the item level choice, because that's equivalent, I believe, to High Mall Normal.
Actually, I hate to say it, but I'm absolutely unfamiliar with the itemization change in the raid. That is a great question for Ian Hazakostas or Owen Langren. Langren and Watcher Dev on Twitter.
I'm sure they'll appreciate those. Don't worry about that. Well, maybe let's get past. We had some of these specific raiding questions then, but maybe we can talk a little bit about class balance. I don't know how specialized you are in that. More general ideas. We've seen a ton of hotfixes in 6.0.2. Obviously, big changes coming in there for the different classes. And I think players were still kind of concerned, like watching some of the community-run arena tournaments. Not the one here at BlizzCon, because that's obviously done in 5.4. But there's still some pretty big balance concerns. I mean, is it just a case of we're just going to have to wait for level 100 and you're kind of stepping away from it at this point right now? Are there any outliers that the class team are looking at, or what's going on with it really?
The class team is always looking at outliers. Like, we have guys that have bots that are running, constantly internally that are checking out TPS numbers in a variety of different circumstances, but also, like, make no mistake about it, we're always looking at the forums, and this sort of 1 month early period gives us that great opportunity to say, okay, we're going to put this out here. We're going to trim down a number of your abilities. You're going to get something crazy at 100. You're going to get to launch meteors. I'm a mage, so that is great fun.
That's pretty cool.
And that's going to change that balance pretty significantly as well. And also how the classes change with regards to hit scaling, crit scaling, all of those elements that change as you level up and as you start to feel stronger. So I wouldn't say that we don't care about level 90s.
Right,
Absolutely, we always care about the state of the game. But this gives us an opportunity to find outliers very early on in the process before you hit that level. We always try to add things that feel overpowered. That's kind of one of our design tenets, like make it feel overpowered. And that necessarily means that it's probably locally overpowered rather than globally overpowered, but sometimes it's the latter, and then you need to make a minor change. Definitely something that we're concerned about and that we're constantly looking at. We're looking forward to the future, both at the end of the Warlords of Draenor, but also for the players that exist right now. And it's a constant sort of seesaw battle to try to make both equivalently balanced, but I think the class team is doing a great job. And we're always listening to your feedback. Please continue posting on the forum, sending us tweets.
So moving on to dungeons, we had a general question about that. We've seen some interesting changes to challenge modes, one even with hotfixes earlier this week. There you cannot retalent, respec, reglyph, and we've also noticed that there are these LFR quality pieces for just completing them. So are you guys trying to reposition challenge modes as more like a super heroic or sort of incentivize people to do them more? Because in MoP they felt sort of more elitist or, really challenging. People just wanted to, go for gold or not even bother finishing them.
Having the concept of heroic back as an element in the next expansion, it helps us kind of create a stepping stone to that, which was nice. Felt like challenge modes were a pretty big step up, and it was also our first opportunity to throw in something that felt like one of those old heroics, those old TBC heroics. And I think we got that concept across, but at the same time, it's a great opportunity for us to say, okay, we're shutting down the challenge mode season. We could potentially make this more accessible. This is, a great time to get more players into this content. We know a lot of players really enjoyed it, but there's a pretty large barrier to entry because when players get very used to running LFG dungeons, they're used to that difficulty setting, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So having the new heroic mode, having a challenge mode requirement for that helps us create sort of that middle ground stepping stone. And I think in the end, our philosophy is to try to get as much content out to as many players as possible through whatever we need to do. However we need to put the carrot there, we feel it's awesome, fun content, and a lot of players seem to really enjoy doing their challenge modes. So let's incentivize that. Let's try to get you in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? You know, why not give them something cool to get from them? So let's skip on now to some Garrison questions a little bit there. We spoke a bit with Corey and Ian recently on the Wowhead Weekly show and asked them a ton of Garrison questions. But there was one that came up that we didn't get around to. So fire it at you, see what you say. So one of the big things that we're seeing with player feedback from that particular interview is a lot of people are kind of concerned about. They're saying, oh, is it really just Garrisons, this expansion? Like, there's a ton going through the Garrison. Like, people feel like you have to have a Garrison, not just because it's, quote unquote, mandatory for raiding
everyone's
or
favorite
something,
word.
but actually just because you have to pick up the legendary question there. Do you feel that the players have valid concerns that there's too much going through Garrisons? And like this idea of they're going to have to spend a lot of time doing Garrisons, is that really even valid?
Like, what does doing a Garrison
Yeah, what
mean?
does doing a Garrison
Is it
even
like
mean?
your half-hill farm? Is it just you stop by a few minutes?
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of just wondering whether the player concerns are valid, that there's a lot going through there, they're going to have to spend a ton of time there, and they actually kind of have to have one to enjoy the expansion. Is that really a thing, or is it being designed around players having to be optional?
Definitely designed around being optional. And the Half Hill Farm, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was a great initial point of feedback, where we felt like too many players were running too many of these at the same time and having to farm, as it were,
Your 300
on their
stat
ult
food. Yeah.
every day, right, in order to get the top tier food. And yet it didn't feel incredibly impactful. The food that you got for it was maybe 25 points better than the lesser one. So this was our opportunity to take a look at that entire system again and say, okay, what is really fun about this? Well, logging in every day and getting presents is really fun. So you get all these missions going,
Clicking on
you've got all these
boxes.
followers, you're able to send them out, and you log in the next day, and I got epic upgrades for this follower, and I have Millhouse now, that's really cool, I'm gonna go talk to him, and then I've got this toy from this inn quest, that's really cool. It lets us concentrate that coolness down. It gives you a chance to customize your character a little bit, choose different buildings that you want that have different powers in different zones. But there were a number of different discussions about how to make this less of a feeling of a daily system that maybe feel like you have to log in and click some things every once in a while versus something that you're looking forward to. And I think the philosophy change there was, what can I do with this? Everything is centered around gameplay. Every single building has an impact on the world. It lets you do more things that day rather than do this and then go have fun. Once you do your chores.
Right.
It's more like log in, get your toys, go play with your toys. It's like Super Christmas. And that was the guiding philosophy behind every single building. What can I do with this out in the world? Once I've built the Mage Tower, or once I've built the level 3 workshop and I can build my own Demolisher, I'm going to take this out to the end game POI that I have for that day for my daily quests, and I'm going to launch rockets at things, and I'm going to blow up everything. It's going to feel awesome, and my daily quest is going to be done in 15 minutes, and now I'm going to go to the Crusaders Coliseum because there's this really cool transmog armor set, and that's kind of the other half of the coin, right? It needs to feel optional. It can't feel like all of these things are required for raiding. There are transmog sets, there's toys, there are so many different ways we can reward your character at this point that aren't purely player power, and that's what a lot of the focus was making this ways to blow out your character in so many different ways that didn't necessarily play back into raiding. A lot of these abilities aren't usable in raids.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. So another Draenor question, since a lot of people are thinking about leveling in the expansion. Do you level at the same rate in Draenor that you do in past expansions? Is the leveling process roughly the same, or is it easier? Usually on beta, the XP gains are sped up, but is that still the case, or are things going to be a little bit slower?
It's interesting because we're doing 10 levels. It's a little bit difficult to tell the difference between the two. I think you'll find that the leveling per zone is a little bit faster than previous. And what we saw in previous expansions was, for example, in Mists of Pandaria, people loved the art style of each individual zone, but felt that they got a little bit of fatigue by the time they hit quest 150 or so. So you're going to find significantly less quests than that. And what that lets us do is put more optional content everywhere. Almost every zone feels like a Timeless Isle. And cataloging all the rares, I'm sure you've probably already seen this, right?
Our guides last week.
And all the collectible followers, all the extra little elements and other ways that we can reward your character and help grow you as a character that aren't just pure, here's a quest item or here's pure XP. Let you have, more of an exploratory experience. And yeah, you may, only go through the main quest line in this zone, or you may wander off into the distance and find some crazy stuff off in the shores. That's what we're going for. So if you don't finish everything in the zone, that's okay. And that's where we want to be at. We want you to feel like you have options and you can play your way.
Absolutely, yeah. And one of the other things that people have been asking about a bit is there's people who actually kind of want to level through dungeons. That was something that was nerfed by comparison to questing quite heavily in previous expansions. Kata was a particular one that springs to mind, where that kind of dropped back from being the way to level. Is that something that you're kind of continuing on with in this one, or are you planning to incentivize players to level through dungeons if they want to a little bit more?
I'd love to give players as many options as humanly possible, because it just makes alt leveling so much more fun. I have 11 characters myself. I'm an alt leveler, and I think one character I leveled purely on archaeology, just because. Just it was something different, and it was something different and fun. And I think I got Taranda's doll at the end of that, and that was cool. And I was like, oh, cool, I'm going to raid with this character. But yeah, I mean, that's a constant source of discussion, and I think questions like that were what got us to the place where we were okay removing Realm First achievements. Because they railroaded you into one course of action, and that was always the best course of action. And instead, it should be, what do you find the most fun? Do that. Yeah. And there are buildings that are centered around doing dungeons, like the inn. There are buildings that are centered around doing PvP, like the Colosseum. So you're going to build your garrison. It's going to take 15 minutes. It's going to be awesome. And then you can start to build it in whatever way you enjoy playing the game, ideally.
Yeah. So you touched upon the Timeless Isle before, which is great because I had a question specifically about that. You've said before that you've learned a lot from the Timeless Isle, that Draenor is in the style of that. There's tons of rares and explorations. But what do you think is similar to the Timeless Isle, and what do you think you've learned from that? Like bigger bag or rares dying really quickly? Just would love to hear your thoughts, because a lot of players feel very polarized by the Timeless Isle.
I think you brought up the two biggest points, which are, hey, this thing's up. Hey, no, it's not. And hey, this thing's up. Oh, it dropped this for me. Really? So we made some pretty major changes, especially to leveling rares and to the leveling content. You're not strongly incentivized to go and repeat every rare. The rares respawn every minute, and you get a big reward the first time you kill them. It's a 100% drop chance. So you get the thing, and then you can kind of move on, and you can explore around the rest of the zone. We had the opportunity to do so many rares now, and they aren't repeatable rares in this content. They're one-time rares, and we know you're only going to be leveling through it one, that character isn't going to level through that zone multiple times, right? So we can make them really fun, one-time explosions of loot. That was a great learning experience from Timeless Isle. Along the same lines, creating more endgame POIs and a wider variety of them, and giving you the option to kind of do anything you want in that endgame POI. So you can get credit for that endgame POI, which is a little bar at the bottom of your screen that says, okay, this is when you're done with your quest for this endgame POI. You can kill rares, you can do events, you can rescue hostages, you can,
I think they're tied to the reputations as well. Like different zones, you can get reps for the different Draenor factions.
Exactly. And that's also tied to the frequency of invasions that occur. So if you're attacking certain groups a whole lot, you're going to get invaded more by that group. So it all ends up kind of this much more longer-tailed, holistic experience that, comes back to your garrison, and you get to go back and fight in your garrison. You get assaulted. It feels like you have a base here for a reason and for a purpose. So I think taking that Timeless Isle philosophy and spreading it out across the world, making it significantly more rewarding because there's so much more content, were two things that we were able to completely double down on. And then not doing an achievement based on low drop rates was also, there's no achievement to kill all the rares.
Yeah, I'm super happy that even there's some mounts that have the 100% drop rate when you first kill them. That is such a good change from Huolan.
I would completely agree with you. And I mean, there is one Mount of Pain in there right now.
The Frostfire Ridge one, the wolf.
Yeah. Not Karash, who only drops one, but it's BOE. So you can sell it on the auction house.
Yep.
And we're kind of, playing with player psychology a little bit there. We want to see what happens. Warlords of Draenor is a great opportunity to experiment with a lot of new things that we feel very strongly about and we feel are very polished at this point. But at the same time, if you look back to TBC, there were so many new elements in TBC compared to Classic. There was a PvP objective in every zone. And some of them didn't work out so well. Like, I don't know if you remember Zangarmarsh. Because nobody really remembers Zangarmarsh.
The two towers, and there's a graveyard in the center,
But it was fun, and it was new, and it was awesome, and it was shiny. And that's what we're going for. We have so many talented designers with so many new ideas that you just kind of want to let them go and see what they come up with. And they came up with some amazing stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we're super excited about just cataloging not only the rares, but the sort of events, the dynamic stuff that spawns in. I mean, do you really envisage this as kind of a replacement to the repetitive nature of daily questing? Are we going to see daily questing making a real resurgence in Warlords of Draenor? Are we focusing on this dynamic, sort of fun, exploration-focused side of things?
It's interesting. When we did Timeless Isle, we specifically decided to do very, very few quests. And the daily quests that are there were intended to be repeatable, but repeatable in a exploratory story manner. Kill 10 anything. Just anything, right?
Yeah.
Go answer Evelyn's question about, you know, history, which is, I thought was really cute and cool. And Evelyn wrote all of those questions herself. She's our senior historian. She did a great job. Really helped us out. And I think that there's a place for all of these things, because what we heard after Talmasile was a significant number of players saying, I miss 5.0. Like, I enjoyed the Golden Lotus dailies, and I enjoyed, you know...
Grass is always greener.
Right. Yeah. Well, they were enjoying it, so they weren't talking on the forums, right? They weren't tweeting us, because who's the loudest is the people that are the unhappiest at the time, usually. Not to say to always tweet unhappy things, because tweeting happy things is great. We like that. But hearing that was great for us. Being able to see, wow, we have a pretty large subset of players that need to do this and this and this and this and this. It was almost similar to back in Cataclysm, when a lot of players that were doing heroic dungeons back in Lich King and were having, you know, multi-polling 5 or 6 or 7 groups and having a great time because they were overpowered at the time, were saying, I don't want difficult dungeons. I want dungeons that are fun for me. Understanding where your audience is at and where the psychology is at is an ongoing and evolving process with any MMO, and I feel like this gives us the ability to hit that in a bunch of different ways. So you have a lot of exploration, but also you'll have daily quests, and you'll have, you know, a lot of these different sub-elements that we've seen before. And they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. It's not, I have to do, and this is where the point comes in, right? I don't have to do those dailies and this thing and this thing. Play how you want.
Yeah. Do you feel that there's a risk of players getting kind of burnt out and remember back in 5.0, particularly with all of the dailies, like you mentioned the Golden Lotus and the Klaxi and the other 2 factions whose name escaped me. Do you think that there's a risk of players having that mentality? Because it's quite a big mentality shift you're asking players to make away from the completionist, no, I have to do everything because it exists, therefore I must complete it, go over to this more sort of optional, like, I'm going to do what's fun and not feel like I have to do everything play style. Do you think that there's a risk there?
I feel like we learned a lot about that risk and the reward from it with pet battles. Not to take everything back to pet battles, but I love pet battles. Having an entirely optional feature that you may assume, someone may have said in a meeting at some point, why would anybody do this? It gives me no power. There's no epics at the end of this. And having a ton of people do it and want significantly more of it gets us into that psychological space of, if you show people what the end game is immediately, and it's not player power gear, for example, if everything is optional, then everything starts to feel optional. And it starts to feel like I can log in for the day and say, in a similar way that you'll go home and you'll say, oh, I feel like playing Hearthstone today, or I feel like drinking a whole lot of coffee and playing StarCraft, or et cetera, you know, playing Heroes of the Storm. It starts to feel like it's your choice and you can do the thing that's the most fun for you at that moment. And that's what games are all about, right? Is giving you that option and making it feel like, okay, you don't have to do all of these things. You can do what you enjoy the most, and we will fully support that.
Yeah. So I have a question about something that ties into one of your other favorite content things, the Darkmoon Fair and Heirlooms. So, you know, at first on the beta, we saw that these Heirlooms that formerly cost Justice Points were now costing gold, but right now, some of them cost Darkmoon Fair tickets. And while the Darkmoon Fair is really awesome, some people are saying, man, this is a lot harder than it used to be getting it for Justice Points. And we've heard some discussion that this is because it's a transition into a new system for Heirlooms. Can you talk a little bit about these stopgap measures and, you know, why couldn't they just put them up for gold? Like, why do they have to be from the Darkmoon Fair, which is pretty more time-consuming to get than just running a few dungeons?
Justice Points and Valor Points had a cap.
Yeah.
Gold doesn't have a cap. So long story short is that we have players that have 9 million gold, and they would just go buy them all immediately. And that's a really good question, and I think it was something that there's definitely like, once you do that, you can't go back, right? Once it's uncapped completely, things lose a pretty significant amount of their value, and the Darkmoon Fair loses a pretty significant amount of its value as a generator of that content, especially when people have consumed quite a bit of the Darkmoon Fair elements already. I mean, we added a bunch more, but they've already consumed a number of those elements. This felt like the right fit for it right now, and we'll continue listening to feedback on it, of course. We're still discussing how the Heirlooms are going to be returning in the capital cities in the future, what system that's going to be. It was definitely one of those, if we give everybody everything right now, then it's all over.
I see, yeah.
And the whole grind is done immediately, right? So we'll do it a step at a time, which is generally what Blizzard does.
Yeah, absolutely. And one real quick question, follow up on the on the Darkmoon Fair. Can we have the race back yet?
Yeah,
we had so much fun testing the race on the beta. We were so sad to see it go. Is it coming in a future patch? Maybe in 6.1?
The race was a lot of fun. We were very happy with how some of the elements of it came out. It definitely was not polished enough to come out right now.
We thought it was.
All I can tell you is I'm not saying it will never come back.
That is extremely mysterious. That is extremely mysterious. So not never. That's a time in the future. So we're happy with that. And one thing which a bunch of players, just to wind up with a really awful question for you, because we're such lovely people. And a lot of players had been coming in saying, all right, can you tell us anything more about flying? Obviously, we know it's not going to be happening in 6.0, and obviously we're in 6.0 right now, so when the expansion launches, we're unlikely to be able to suddenly fly in Draenor. Do we know anything about the future plans for flying? And, you know, we initially heard that it would be a quest chain, and you're going to do this epic cross-patch quest chain. Is that still on the cards, or has that been completely thrown out, and we're saying no to flying for the rest of the expansion?
I think it's all going to depend on how it turns out as a gameplay experience. It's all going to depend on you, the players, and how you feel, and whether or not you enjoy this, and what you enjoy about it, because we haven't done this for so long, right? It was always, well, this area may be difficult to navigate, or this area may be a pain to quest around in, but in 5 more levels I'm going to be able to fly, so I don't care anyway. Now we're forced to be honest with ourselves about what's really fun about this gameplay element and what maybe isn't. I think we've had immense amounts of fun with it so far, and one of the things that it's let us do is make incredibly overpowered Garrison toys. So if you get the Workshop Tier 2, for example, you get a rocket that you get to set up, and to launch yourself in,
So
and then it lets you fly around the world, and then it explodes when it hits something. It lets us play around a little bit more with those kind of things, with spawning in very classic WoW spawning style, and it's something that I've missed, having been a 2004 WoW player. Right. When you went into Moonbrook the first time, and you got completely destroyed by 3 dudes that ran out of houses and fireballed you, and you started really caring about the spawning and the gameplay of an area. It makes the world so much more dangerous. It makes world PvP so much more fun when you don't have to make an item that knocks people off of their mounts because they keep flying mounted, right? So I think we're going to be solidly listening to feedback on this. No plans right now, one way or the other. We're gonna play it by ear. We're gonna see what happens. I think that so far though, we're very happy with the results that we've gotten from removing flying in the current content.
Cool. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us. Great chat, and that's it from us, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.